There's a world that exists beyond our comprehension. A world that bridges the gap between reality and the paranormal. Have you ever been subjected to such a terrifying horror that you know beyond a shadow of a doubt that what you are experiencing is real, but you refuse to believe it in the exact moment that it's occurring? I'm going to tell you a true story of the exact moment I came face to face with the apparition. Until this experience, I was a lifelong skeptic. I didn't believe that ghosts or the afterlife even existed in the first place. I'd also like to warn you that this story will get pretty dark, so buckle up. I used to be an avid motorbike enthusiast. It was one of my favorite things to do, and I'd always go riding with my friend Tim. Now, Tim was a bit of a stubborn guy. He never wore a helmet and always drove a little recklessly, while I was the exact opposite. I would always tell him that one day he was going to get seriously injured. I told him that I didn't want to end up being his caretaker if he ended up being paralyzed from an accident. He would always just shrug his shoulders and tell me I'm just living life to the fullest. One summer night, for some reason, I had trouble sleeping for several hours. I was tossing and turning and had this overwhelming fear that something wasn't right. Eventually, I did fall asleep, and I had one of the most bizarre dreams, and to this day, I have never even remotely had a dream that came so close to being so terrifying as this one was. I remember being in a totally dark hallway. The walls were completely blackened. Torches were barely lighting up the hallway, while everything else was pitch black. At the end of the hallway, I could see a bright light shining directly down on a casket. So I'm walking down this creepy hallway, and right behind the casket is a man with no face and wearing a robe. He almost looked like the Grim Reaper. I see him pointing to the casket, and as I finally approach it, I look back up at this Grim Reaper figure. He doesn't even say a word, but I could tell that he really wants me to open the casket. I was really fearful of doing it, so I refused. I was worried that I would see myself in the casket, so I didn't want any part in this. So I just yelled to this figure and tell him no, I'm not going to open it. I then wake up. It's about 9 a.m. on a Saturday, and I see a couple texts from my phone. It's from Tim. The text read, "I love you. I'm okay." Double texted. Confused. I was wondering what he meant by that, because Tim was never the guy to randomly text me that he loves me. He was more the guy who would show you his love, rather than tell me. So I respond to him asking, saying, "I love you. You sure you're okay, dude?" I received no response after that and carried on with my day, not thinking much of it. A couple hours later, I'd say around noon, I receive a phone call coming from Tim's number. I pick it up, but could hear nothing but faint breathing on the other end of the line. I mean, it was so faint, but you could still hear it. "Tim, what's going on?" Still nothing. And then he hung up. Now I'm really starting to get concerned, so I call him back. No answer at all. I text him and tell him if this is some sort of game, he better fess up, because it isn't funny. So then I figure I drive about 15 minutes to his house to pay him a visit. I knock on the door, and his sister answers. She looks visibly distraught as she greets me. Tim lived alone. We were both 33 at the time. Because I didn't want to seem nosy and ask her why she was even there in the first place, I asked her if she could get Tim for me, because he had texted me and called me earlier in the morning. She actually sounded a little offended. "What do you mean he called you? My brother is gone. This isn't a joke." I looked at her dumbfoundingly. "He's dead?" She then said, "You don't know? Last night he passed away in a motorcycle accident. He was declared dead on sight." Instantly, I was floored by the news. I told her that it couldn't be, because I responded to her again, that he had just texted me and called me this morning. She told me that it was impossible, because she had visited the hospital, and he was already dead when he was being transferred there from the ambulance. Time of death was 11 p.m. the night before. I got the text and phone call. Even stranger, at the time of the accident, he had his phone on him, and it was completely shattered and broken after the wreck. I showed her the text and the phone call log, and sure enough, the text registered at the time of 9:26 a.m. and the phone call 12:37 p.m. Again, this was on his phone number, and nobody else could have gotten a hold of his. I didn't even tell her about the nightmare I had, because I didn't want to alarm her or think I was nuts. It was from then on that I truly believed that Tim was calling me from beyond the grave. Maybe to let me know that he crossed over and that it was fine. To this day, it still doesn't make sense to me, especially that nightmare. Was it a coincidence that I dreamt of a casket and the Grim Reaper? Was it even more of a coincidence that I got texts and calls from Tim? No flipping way. Remember, I'm a skeptic, so I try to rationalize this as much as I could. But the only logical explanation that I could come up with was that it was Tim all along, and he's communicating with me somehow. First of all, I wanted to say that even if the Ouija board was initially made as a toy, I believe that it is a great vehicle to use to summon spirits. Whether they are friendly spirits or not so friendly regardless, I'd like to make it a point that every real experience that occurred in this apartment was most likely a result of using a Ouija board, and that I highly advise that you not treat it lightly. The first story I'm going to tell you is about the time I played the Ouija board and my skeptical husband, who was taunting spirits to possess him and his soul, and the poltergeist that won't leave. My husband has always rejected the idea of ghosts, while I am the complete opposite. Actually, one could say I personally seek spirits out. It's mostly because it is a genuine curiosity about the afterlife, and I want to believe that there are entities that reside long after we depart this earth. Anyway, I'm going to take you back to 2004, when I lived in an older rental unit in Tucson, Arizona. This entire complex had a reputation of being known for insane activity. Right outside the apartment doors, many visitors have complained about lights flickering, disembodied voices that are almost inhumane in conversing with each other, bangs on the walls, and in many apartments, full-blown apparitions. This place was built on Indian burial ground, which would explain much of the activity. My old neighbor even once told me a story about how she was showering with her door open when she was all alone, and she heard a loud crash coming from her room. When she investigated, she noticed that her lamp had fallen off the desk and onto the floor. Then, a few minutes after her shower, she went to look across the bathroom to the open door, to see a dark silhouette of a head peeking over and looking at her. That's when she froze in shock and immediately moved from the complex. Me and my husband at the time were in our late 20s, and I wanted to prove to him that all the stories of this complex were not just everyone's imagination. So I brought out this really old Ouija board, a really wooden old thing dating back to the 1930s. I am an avid old collector of old antiques, and especially older Ouija boards. I knew very well that we had some sort of demon living in our apartment, and even though it was terrifying at times, it would still leave us alone until we played on the board. We start asking the Ouija board questions. Who are you? What kind of spirit is this? Things of that nature. We never got any replies, but I could feel the energy. My husband, however, was getting sick of playing, as he always thought of it as childish and a waste of time. I remember him saying when we both had our hands on the planchet, if demons are really truly real, whatever is living here can take over my body. I immediately stopped my husband. I told him, you cannot do that. You don't know what you're messing with. This stuff is no joke. After that, he just sort of looked at me and told me that he was done with games and he was off to bed for that night. For the next few nights after that, oddly enough, activity increased. Cabinets and cupboards in the kitchen would open and close shut. Objects would move, and other stuff would happen that made it too obvious to deny. We had a dark energy. One time, I was in the kitchen cooking, and my husband wasn't even home. I had forgot that he had left to go get me flour from the store. When I felt a heavier breathing down the back of my neck, I turned around, and I saw a shadow figure from the living room, standing quickly, and then dissolve. It was like 1 second it was there, and the next, it was gone. Then, in 2004, I had an experience almost every day. I was working a night shift from 7 p.m. to 7 a.m. I kept feeling a presence in my bedroom that was undeniable. Many times, I felt that there was a demon sitting on my chest, and I couldn't even breathe. It was not a friendly presence. I told my husband, and he didn't even believe me. Then one night I was off from work, and I fell asleep next to my husband. He woke up gasping for air, and I said what was wrong. He said he felt like he was having a heart attack, but also pressure on his chest. That feeling quickly disappeared. And another night, when I was at work, he told me something else had happened. He felt that someone was trying to choke him out in his sleep when there was nobody home. I got off shift early one morning and arrived home at 5 a.m. and my husband was in the living room, awake and very frightened. He claims he saw the figure of a man enter the bedroom and approach our bed. He claims the figure put his hands out towards him as if he wanted to strangle him. My husband started yelling in French for help. It was then when we realized that we couldn't stay in the apartment complex and that my husband had conjured up something very horrible. Even after all those experiences, he still doesn't fully believe. He finally does admit, though, that something was going on, but he still says it's just our thoughts that made us believe something was there, when in reality, nothing really was. Scary.
I know this is going to sound a bit wild, but the local Taco Bell in my area is actually a very haunted place, with tons of activity that occurs on a daily basis. Numerous people have reported paranormal experiences there, from the staff that work there to even the customers. A lot of times activity would occur in the men's bathroom, one of the staff members once reported seeing the full-blown apparition of an elderly man. They were working late and were the only ones in the building, as they were locking up the place for the night. That's when they heard strange gargling noises coming from the bathroom, and out of curiosity, the employee went to go check it out. They went in to see what was going on, and the bathroom was empty, but as they looked into the mirror, they saw a hideous old man whose face was literally melting for a few seconds before disappearing after a couple of seconds. Because of how peculiar the place is, paranormal investigators and Ouija boards were used in the bathroom to conjure up and communicate with spirits. They were able to find out that years ago there was an old man named Tom who used to live in a house in the 19th century. Tom had to be the figure that the employee saw in the mirror late night while closing up the store. One of the craziest things that happened there was when they were doing an EVP session in the bathroom. A paranormal team was in there after close and asked the presence to show a sign that they were there. Nothing had happened that night, so the team ended up stopping and left in the night. The next morning, workers went into the room, and to their utter shock, the bathroom mirror had a huge crack that wasn't even there the day before. Nobody was able to explain how the huge crack even happened. Another time, a team went in there, and one of them felt a very sick feeling all of a sudden. Nothing was wrong with them before, until after they entered this bathroom. Now, this was the same team as before, and that person never felt sick while in the bathroom until this very moment. Now here is my personal experience that still completely scares me to this day and doesn't even make sense to me. Mostly because, for one thing, what I saw in the bathroom while I was a manager working there was not even the old man, but someone else. Of course, this happened when we already closed up for the night. I had left my husband in the building, as he was waiting for me to get done with everything and was my ride home. I was pregnant with my 2-year-old daughter at the time. I had to clean the bathroom, so I went in, and immediately on this day felt goosebumps that I usually didn't feel in there, oddly enough. It also felt unusually cold in the bathroom as well. I finished up and started to wash my hands. After I finished, I looked up into the mirror above the sink, and it looked as if my face was almost morphing into another person's face. It's hard to explain, but it was only for a split second, but really long enough to notice. It was a face of a girl about my age, but both eyes were blackened out. Her lips were busted open and bleeding, and she had multiple scars on her face as well. I heard a soft whisper say, "Out." I jumped immediately, not expecting this to happen, and looked at the mirror again. My face was mine again, but I ran out of the bathroom. When I got home, I told my husband what had happened. I don't know if there have been other sightings of this girl, but I know with the stories of the old man, that really got to me. I know I saw and heard this girl's face and voice. I know I wasn't just tired. My husband didn't even believe me, even though he knows that bathroom has a lot of history. All I can say is, I'm not crazy, and it did happen. Whether you believe me or not, it's not something I ever want to experience. Maybe it was a demon. I really don't know. I live in a house on Oakcrest Drive with my mother Kathy, sister Andrea, 2 brothers Ryan and Justin, my mother's boyfriend Richard, and his son Alex. It all started before we moved in. My mother, Andrea, and I would come over and do some cleaning for Richard while he was at work. One afternoon while we were cleaning the basement family room, we heard footsteps in the upstairs hallway. We thought that maybe Richard was home. When we went upstairs, the house was empty, so we left. Occasionally, Richard's granddaughter Brianna would come over, and my mother and I would watch her. One afternoon while we were sitting on the couch, Brianna jumped into my mother's arms and started saying, "Grandma, there's a scary man going into Grandpa's room." She was 2 years old at the time. Later that same day, she came out of the basement family room saying that the scary man was down there too. On a more recent night, Brianna stayed over and slept in the room that used to be her mother's, and she couldn't sleep. She was crying all night long. Richard had told me that when Brianna's mother was little, she would have night terrors in that room to the point where she was scared of even her mother and Richard. At about 3 a.m. on most nights, you can hear heavy footsteps in the hallway, like someone wearing boots. Sometimes it even sounds like running. The coat closet door and the linen closet doors can be found open on most mornings by themselves. One night my bedroom door was opened so hard that it banged into the wall, and then I heard footsteps walking down the hallway. I went to go see who was up and found everyone asleep. Every morning you can find the dining room chairs pulled out from the table by themselves too. We've gotten pretty used to it now, to the point where the footsteps don't bother us. Everyone in the house has heard them. In the morning we just close all the doors, push in the chairs and go about our day. Most of the activity happens at night or in the afternoon. I don't know the history of the house or the street, but maybe something happened there. The house isn't that old, early 60s or 70s. I plan on doing a little more research, and I will keep you posted. In 1979, I was in the US Army in Gießen, West Germany, as a veterinary technician. Our office was on the first floor of a World War II era 3-story building, which, by the way, was spooky enough in itself. At the time, I was not only a vet tech, but the acting receptionist. My desk sat in a corner about 10 to 15 feet away from a hallway to the back of our office, which was just off-center enough that you could not see all the way down it. Just at the beginning of this hall, on the right-hand side, was the door into our exam room. I don't remember the exact date anymore, but I certainly remember what happened. I was sitting at my desk, working on some records, when I happened to look up and, lo and behold, standing there, just to the side of the exam room door, was a man dressed in a white lab coat with grey hair and black-rimmed glasses, just as plain as day. He was so real, I believe you could have actually touched him. Anyhow, I looked at him, and he looked at me, turned, and walked through the wall. As I said before, I believe this building, along with others on our post, were from the time of the Second Great War, and could have been used for anything. I did not personally know the history of them. Just a note, I'm used to this type of appearance. I've been seeing people my whole life, and it does not even raise my hackles. Before and since then, many ethereal folks have passed through my life on their way to or from somewhere.
This is only the second telling of this tale in almost 40 years. In 1973, at the ever-observant age of 4, I had my first brush with the paranormal. On a hazy autumn morning, my mother unexpectedly interrupted my routine when she dressed me in new going somewhere clothes. She explained to me that we were to attend a wake that day. Even at that young age, I knew that a wake had something to do with death. Furthermore, I could sense her discomfort, so I did not ask her any questions. She did add that it was not for a relative of ours, but of our friend, Geraldine. As our taxi pulled into the funeral home, Geraldine greeted us and accompanied in to meet the family. Unlike my mother, I knew no one there and felt a little intimidated, So I was relieved when Mom asked Geraldine to stay with me as she went into the viewing parlor to pay her respects. Geraldine sat with me in the lobby as family members conversed in small groups. I looked around, hoping to see any children that might be there. There were none, but I couldn't help noticing one person in particular. An older gent, probably in his late 50s, was listening in on a conversation extremely intently. He was a little gaunt and seemed to be very worried. He stood there with his hand on his cheek, shoulder to shoulder with one of the mourners. I watched as he left this group to listen in on another and then another, looking a little more pained each time. No one even so much as looked at him. Interesting. I remember wondering, with my innocent and limited grasp of the concept of mortality, if he was the man we were here to see. With that, the man turned and looked directly at me. He looked at me inquisitively and then offered up a meek smile. My eyes widened and I turned my gaze away. My heart racing, I could not resist looking back once more as I tugged on Geraldine's blouse. I successfully got her attention, but to my dismay, he could no longer be found. It was just then when my mother made her way back to us asking if I was ready to go home. I was more than willing. She thanked me for being a big boy and behaving so well while she was gone. I have always known that the situation could be rationalized as one not of a paranormal nature, but the feeling I experienced were so intense that no rational explanation has ever seemed to satisfy. Why would no one acknowledge him? And it seemed that he only saw me after I wondered if he were dead. I scanned the room thoroughly for him as we left to no avail, whereas I easily noticed the strange man before. To this very day, I've never been able to shake the eerie suspicion that I witnessed a ghost at his own wake. What do you think? It started when my boyfriend's father bought the funeral home and wanted my boyfriend and me to move out of state to take care of it because his parents didn't want to move out of state. I quit my job and moved out of state with my boyfriend to help his parents take care of the funeral home. When my boyfriend and I first got to the funeral home, it was big, spacious, and a bit creepy. The outside was beautiful as well as the inside, but the place had many doors, all of which eventually led back to the main room. My boyfriend often sees dark figures mostly on this one side, near the side door that leads to the apartment on top of the funeral home. Of course, no one lives on top of the funeral home. Too scary. I've never seen anything the whole time I've been there, but one time I was going to use the fax and computer to look for a job. Being the weirdo that I am, I went to the funeral home alone. I went to the back door and the back door was unlocked, so I went inside, turned on the lights, and went to the office. I was faxing my resumes and surfing the web for jobs when all of a sudden the computer just shuts off. Figure it's time to leave. I didn't feel anything and wasn't scared until I got close to the back door. Somehow, my body was telling me to run. It got cold in the little hallway by the back door, and I felt goosebumps all over my body. I ran towards the door, not looking back, just opened the door and closed it and locked it from the outside. Ever since, I've never gone back to the funeral home alone. My boyfriend's uncle had a similar experience at the funeral home. He came to the funeral home to help my boyfriend cut the grass and rake the leaves. He got there before my boyfriend and thought my boyfriend was inside. So, he went to that same back door that I went to and found it unlocked. He thought my boyfriend was in there and walked into the same spot where I felt something. He said he called my boyfriend's name and it was dark inside and no lights. He got super scared when he realized no one was there. He ended up leaving, and ever since then, my boyfriend's uncle won't go into the funeral home by himself. If he has to go shovel snow, cut the grass, or rake the leaves, he would bring his own lawnmower or his own shovel. My boyfriend has had many experiences at that funeral home, and the scariest experience yet. When the funeral is done and everyone leaves, my boyfriend and I would make sure that the doors are all locked before we leave. There are days when we come in to get the mail, and the side door and that back door would be unlocked. We always thought that maybe someone broken in and even went inside to check, but would never find anyone. My boyfriend said one time he opened the funeral for a family to bring things to the funeral, and when he locked up, all the doors were locked. He said he went to the side door and somehow it was unlocked. He said hello, and someone with a male voice answered him back saying hello to him too. He got really freaked out and wouldn't go back inside. When I got off work, he made me go with him to search the place, and like always, we would never find anyone. No matter how many times we locked the side and back door, next time we come back, it would be unlocked. Then a couple days after that door incident with my boyfriend, he said while we were sleeping in bed, he swears he saw a tall figure walked around our bed and came to his side and got on top of him. He said he tried to scream for me to wake up, but I couldn't hear him. When he finally broke free, he woke me up and he was drooling all over his pillow. He was so scared that we slept with the bedroom door closed, and we both prayed before bed and put crosses up around the house and inside our room. 3 weeks later, he drove out of state to see his parents, and his mom took him to see a shaman lady. She said that a female ghost from the funeral liked him a lot. It was the female ghost that answered him, disguising her voice as the male voice that answered by him, and she was the one that followed him home. The shaman lady told my boyfriend that she told the spirit to leave, and everything should be fine now. I was home alone in our apartment when my boyfriend went out of state. The night my boyfriend left, I had rolled over to his side, and I could have sworn something was on top of me because I looked at the alarm clock and I could swear I was up, but somehow still asleep too. I remember hearing myself pray and sing a Christian song in my head. I woke up singing the Christian song out loud, and only 2 minutes had passed. I wasn't scared or anything. I just prayed and then thought it was a dream and went back to bed. The next day, late at night, my boyfriend told me what the shaman lady said, which creeped me out. After that, we haven't had any experiences with the funeral home. We had alarms put in the funeral home because the doors kept unlocking by themselves, and we put a bolt on the side door, so even if it unlocks, no one can get in. I doubt anyone would want to come in. I was so glad when his parents decided to sell the funeral home. I can't see ghosts, but my boyfriend seems to attract them and he can see them. I will have to write about our apartment that we live in now in my next story. Hopefully, I'll have it up before we move out in September. Although I've had many experiences with the supernatural, I'm going to start with the most recent and go from there. To give you some background, I work in a funeral home as an administrative assistant in Kirtland, New Mexico. I know, a funeral home, but I'm perfectly comfortable there. I've been alone in there on a number of occasions while the directors are off on a service, which is when I notice things more often than not. The main reason for this is because when the building is empty of others, it is usually quiet, except for the music that is a constant during the day. But when there are others there, there's a lot of talking, conversing going on, which tends to black out the sounds of anything spiritual going on. My office sits at the front of the building to the left of the front entryway, with the bathrooms on the other side of my office as well as the door to the prep room. The arrangement room door is catty-corner to my office door in the same hallway, with the chapel to the right of the entrance and 2 more offices in the break room behind that. The funeral home used to be a private residence, and then was a church before it finally became a funeral home. I'm not exactly sure how long the building has been there, but plan on doing some research on it when I have the time to do so without interruption. My first time alone in the building was probably about 3 weeks ago. During my first week there, Jess and Brian, I'm not using real names for obvious reasons, had to travel to another city for the services that day, so I was left to man the fort, so to speak, from 8 a.m. until they returned at around 3 p.m. that afternoon. The first thing to happen was the sound of the front door opening and closing, including the little dinger going off, so I jumped up from the company computer, where I was working on some folders and books for a family, to go greet whoever it was that just came through the front door, only to find no one in the foyer. I shrugged it off as my imagination and went back into the office to continue with my work. As the minutes passed, I had forgotten all about the odd sounds of the front door and the dinger going off, and was deep into my work at that time, concentrating hard. By this time, it was about 10:45 a.m. I'd been there for a couple of hours alone already and was doing just fine. Like I said, I don't get an uncomfortable feeling in there, when I heard someone walking through the building from behind me. So I, once again, left the computer where I was working to go see if someone came in, and I missed hearing the dinger to the door going off. I started checking the rooms in front of the building, making a complete circle to the back and around to see the front of the building again, to find no one there. All I could think at this point was, it has got to be my imagination. And so, I went back to my office to resume working again. About 10 minutes or so had passed by at the time, so it was probably about 11 a.m. This time, when I felt a tap on my shoulder. I turned to look and no one was there yet again, so I said out loud, "Hello? Can I help you with something? Are you just curious about me because I'm new here, or are you wondering if I can tell that you're here?" I didn't get an answer much, as I would have liked one, just to know for sure that I wasn't losing it. The activity stopped after that, for the rest of the day anyway. Whoever or whatever is there in that building isn't harmful, or I would have felt very uncomfortable there alone, I'm sure. I've talked to Jess about it, which has been there for 3 years now, and she admits that she has had some experiences there as well, but never anything harmful, just more curious than anything. We do have some remains of an unclaimed person in our garage that we can't do anything with, so his remains stay there, but neither Jess or I know if it is actually him that is there, or if it's previous owners of the building. Whenever I enter the building, if no one's in the front entryway or close by, I always say hello, Teddy, just in case it is, in fact, the one who is in our garage. If it's not him, I'm sure that eventually whoever it is will let me know in some way, "Hey, that's not me, I am so-and-so," and I will change my new habits. Until then, I like to think it's Teddy and he is just looking for acknowledgement to the fact that he is who he is. I do realize this could be my imagination, or even what could be chalked up to nervousness of being alone in a funeral home. However, I myself do not believe this is the case, since I've never felt uncomfortable there since my beginning. Thank you all for the chance to submit my story, and comments are welcome as long as they aren't derogatory.
Do you feel creepy? Do you feel creepy? Ah, you hear music now, and it's making you want to comment below and tell me your favorite story that you liked. And also, I'm back, and it's a new year, guys, so thank you so much. My voice seems like it's stronger than ever. Well, maybe not, I don't want to jinx it, but anyway, guys, Happy New Year. It's 2022, and I really hope you enjoyed the stories. Please leave a like, leave a comment for the algorithm. I know I hate asking for this kind of stuff, but that's just the way it goes. The algorithm hates you if you don't do that. So guys, love you, and I'll see you in the next video, and listen to the creepy music still. Yeah, okay, I'll just go, guys. Maybe not, because my voice is back. For the most part, I think. Bye-bye.